So we continue our exploration of a particular commentary on mind training called the 8th session mind training. And this particular mind training really focuses on attachment to the body as self. So if you were to punch me in the stomach, I would say, you punched me. It's my stomach that's hurting, but I would identify that as you punched me. So I'm just going to quickly review the previous. We're now on, I think, the 4th of these sessions. So the first was an overview of essentially Tonglen and the meaning of attachment to the body. And then the second one was, all right, let's go deeper and think about how we use food as comfort or attraction and repulsion, rather than that, really be in touch with the infinite number of beings that reside in the body, which now we know scientifically is the truth of our gut bacteria. So not about comfort, pleasure, like, dislike, but making an offering to the infinite number of beings. Then last week was seeing the suffering of the world and practicing Tonglen, but multiplying our body infinite numbers of times so that we are individually face to face with all the suffering beings, not just thinking of a group, but thinking, let's say in Ukraine, we could think of the suffering grandmothers, the suffering children, one-to-one in front of them, the suffering soldiers on both sides, one-to-one in front of them. So making a very personal connection. And this teaching will take us even deeper to really look at what does it mean when we have compassion and love and a confidence in the interbeing nature of reality and the illusory quality that gives rise to I'm on one side, you're on the other side of this dance. So as we're approaching this, this goes as a teaching that goes from the sutras throughout all the way into Vajrayana. And it focuses on what does it mean to offer the body. So the visualization starts out in a way that might be really frightening. Like in the West, it's like a scene from Halloween or something, or your favorite horror movies. So it's imagining your body as just the flesh and blood filling a room and offering it to the hungry ghosts. So it does sound both wild and like a monster movie that we've always had inside our heads. But the purpose of these stories is to really go quite deep with them and explore them and explore the teaching that's held within them. So it goes back to the earlier lives of the Buddha before he had fully developed his compassion. And there's a very famous pilgrimage place in Nepal called Namo Buddha, which commemorates this previous life of the Buddha when he was born into a wealthy family. And he was out with his friends going for a walk, and he looked over the cliff they were walking along and saw a hungry tiger. And the description of the tiger is that the tiger is screaming and she's surrounded by baby tigers. And he could see that the pain of the starvation that the mother tiger was feeling would lead her to eat the babies or vice versa. So his heart just opened in complete compassion. And he leapt off the cliff and offered his body. So there was no hesitation, there was no fear, there was a complete opening to the suffering. So still, even in this maybe kinder, gentler story of offering the body, thinking of something like that is terrifying when we think of, immediately as Westerns, I'm not ready for that, I can't do that, what is going on here? So just to say, even the Buddha had many lives of developing compassion before he had the capacity to do that. And that we're enjoined not even to consider it until it's as easy as offering a cabbage. This is Shantideva's rule, and the cabbage is the most common, cheapest vegetable. So let's just say none of us are there yet. But what is the teaching in this story? And when we get into the teaching of this story, it becomes incredible. So one translation of the Buddha's thought process goes like this. 2 things alone cause people to ignore the suffering of others: attachment to pleasure and inability to give aid. But if I cannot feel pleasure while another being suffers, and if I have the power to help, how can I ignore them? So this brings us right back down to earth. How is it that we are ignoring the suffering of others? How are we like the friends of the Buddha who just walk by and they don't even look to see what's going on at the bottom of the cliff and the starving tiger? And then what holds us back? Attachment to feeling comfort in our body and inability to give aid. I can say, I'm not able to do this right now. But then he goes further, how can I feel pleasure while another being is suffering? And if I have the power to help, how can I ignore them? So the next part of the sutra, this body is a constant source of suffering, and the wise man rejoices at expending his body for the benefit of others. Therefore, I will cast myself down into the precipice, and with my body I will save the tigress from killing her young ones, and likewise save the young ones from being devoured by their mother. So he looks at the situation even more deeply and says, I'm attached to the comfort of this body, but this is an illusory thing. This body is always causing me suffering. Those of us past a certain age, every day a new thing goes wrong. And there's arthritis here, arthritis there, dental here, dental there. I would like to believe I could maintain comfort for the body, but not possible. So then, how do we go even deeper into this story? This attachment to the body and wanting the body to always be healthy, to never feel any pain, is classically what we would call a demon. And for the purposes of today, we're going to equate hungry ghosts and demons. So demons is a way of identifying our fears. Anything that keeps us from seeing the nature of our minds is classified as a demon. And the definition of the hungry ghosts are beings that are insatiable. It's a realm just above the hell realms, where there's less suffering from than what's described in the hell realms, but there is an insatiability of getting any comfort. So they're described as demon-like figures that have huge mouths and teeny tiny little necks, so they never actually can swallow. So we're asked to think about what are the let's just say, what are the triggers in our lives that take us away from resting in the nature of mind and send us into a whole realm of fear-based or ego inflation-based inquiries. So it's also said that when Buddha, as Prince Siddhartha, was leaving the castle, he had seen sickness, old age, death, and decided that he needed to leave his life of comfort, essentially for the sake of all sentient beings, and the pain of leaving his family. He's opening the door, he's leaving the castle, and Mara appears to him, and Mara is the personification of demons, and says, "Go back, it's not too late. You can have your palace, you can become a great king, you can have your comfort, you'll benefit beings. Go back through the door." And Buddha looks at him and says, "Mara, I know you." So essentially, in this mind training, we are looking at those things that are monsters for us, that are our fears personified, and saying to them, "Mara, I know you." Now, there are many, many, many practices, many stories, and we relate to ones that allow the biggest exploration for us. And whole sanghas revolve around practices. There are lineage practices, there are individual practices that teachers specialize in. There are texts that teachers specialize in. But this particular practice of offering our bodies is something that the contemporary teacher Sultram Alioni specializes in. So the next part of this talk is drawn from her book, Feeding Your Demons, by Sultram Alioni. And so she's gone very, very deep into this practice and explored, what does it mean? What can we learn from it? And how does that free our minds into liberation? So she went back to the great, great spiritual teacher, Machig Lobdron. And Machig Lobdron taught a Vajrayana practice called Chud, in which we create a pile of our flesh and blood, turn it into nectar, and offer it, particularly offering it first to hungry ghosts and demons. So let's just begin with Machig Lobdron. One of her quotes says, "As long as there is ego, there are demons. When there is no more ego, there are no more demons." So the whole perspective that Sultram Alioni is using to approach this conceptual, imaginary Vajrayana practice is, what if we stop struggling with our demons? What would it be like if we stopped the struggle and relaxed? What would happen if we befriended those traumas, triggers, sore points, wounds, and what we carry from that as either an outer being causing the wound or an inner shame and blame causing the wound? What would it be like if we didn't struggle? And she has created quite an extraordinary teaching from this called Feeding Your Demons. So first of all, she goes over how did Magic Lojong classify these outer and inner demons. So the outer ones, illness, the different things we fear, addictions, knowing that love and hate are very close, relationships, and family dynamics. These are all sources of incredible pain and wounding in our lives that we carry. And then the inner, anxiety, shame, depression, and then something called demons of elation that are when we get attached to success, whether it's spiritual success or worldly success, or excessive pride, or, and this is the source of all of it, ego inflation, egocentricity. So she defines egocentricity as the deeply held belief that we are somehow separate from what we experience as other. So let's say the source of all of this wounding that we carry, fear that we carry, the inner anxiety and shame and depression, all of it could be thought of that we are somehow separate from what we experience as other. So as we look at the practice that she developed for us to understand the extraordinary teaching both in the sutra and in this mind training of offering the body, it's in our imaginations. So now with our imaginations, we're looking at attachment to body, and we're looking at, the trauma is not happening right now, the wounding is not happening right now, but what are we carrying in our thoughts from experiences? And just to say, this is something that we tread very softly, gently, and carefully on, and people who have post-traumatic stress, this is not something you jump in. This is something that if you see that there might be a meaningful teaching in there for you, you would work with your therapist or directly in the same room with a trusted friend or guide. Each one knowing, at this moment, what is safe for them. Okay, so let's go even deeper, because this is really a powerful, powerful way to examine how we carry our fear and how that fear blocks us from resting in the nature of our minds. So the quote that's most often brought up from Magic Lojong: confess your hidden faults, approach what you find repulsive, help those you think you cannot help. Anything that you are attached to, let it go. Go to the places that scare you. So we're really going deep into the mind training today. Go to the places that scare you. And what we'll do today is describe the practice. And then Pema Chodron has a book that's called Go to the Places That Scare You. And Sotomayor Alioni has Feeding the Demons. So you can gently explore in a progressive way what is appropriate for you and what wound is appropriate, or fear or trigger is appropriate for you to look at. So as always, you might start today with something that's maybe a mild compulsion that you have, whether you react continuously to one of the isms, or compulsive eating or compulsive entertainment, something that you're familiar with. So the practice, as Tsultrim Allione has explored it, has 5 steps. And the first is, okay, let's sit with this discomfort. Let's locate it in the body. And then, just in the same way, Siddhartha saw it as a personified figure, Mara. Let's visualize that energetic feeling as a being in front of us and have a conversation with that being. And she lists helpful questions. The first question is, what do you want from me? So we've been carrying some sort of compulsion, some sort of trigger most of our lives, and now we're seeing it in front of us. We want to let go of the repressed or stuffed feelings or the reactivity that feels out of control, the reactivity that feels automatic. So we let that arise before us, and really, what does it look like? What does this being look like? What color, what shape? What are the features like? Does it hold weapons? Spend some time just exploring, what does this uncomfortable energy feel like if it were to be right in front of you? And the questions are, what do you want from me? And that's when our fear expresses itself and really helps us not repress or avoid, but really name the fear. Because the fear will say, I want, then you fill in the blank. So then there's an invitation to go much deeper than that. Okay, this is what that fear is expressing, that monster, that hungry ghost. But what do you need from me? That's what you want, but what do you need from me? And that questioning allows us to go even deeper. And, you may sit with that question, repeating it many, many, many times till you feel you've isolated what the unexpressed need is. So the third question is, how will you feel if you get what you need? And you let that monster tell you. So it still may not be very clear. It's not so easy to get to both to the need and what the demon will feel when that need is satisfied. So the invitation now is to change places. And you're the demon, and you're looking at you, and you're expressing, what I want from you is, what I need from you is, when my need is met, I will feel. So just allowing ourselves to really be inside, not the traumatic situation, but what we're carrying, or not the wounding situation, not the compulsive situation, but Why does this keep reoccurring no matter how much work I do? What are the unanswered questions about why this hurts me over and over again, triggers me over and over again? What can that fear or trigger tell me about what it needs to be gone? And so then it gets really interesting. We go back to our own place again. We dissolve our body into nectar, and then we visualize that demon being fed until the demon is totally satisfied. And so this is not feeding the demon in the sense of wood making a fire bigger. This is seeing that unexpressed need, that unexpressed energetic connection that needs to be released. So in feeding the wound so that hurt is fully healed in the satisfaction of receiving the nectar from one's own body. You know, you can think of it like feeding the demon becoming a baby and feeding the demon with a bottle. You really start to see what is the energy of hurt that I've been carrying all this time, and what does it feel like to release that? So feeding, feeding, feeding until the hungry ghost feels satisfied, and then really inviting a different kind of connection. So the fourth step in her process is making that demon an ally. So no longer hurt and wounded, the former demon now has the potential to be an ally. And the questions are, how will you help me? How will you protect me? And what pledge or commitment do you make to me? How can I gain access to you? Now, this is so interesting. This relationship in story form is carried in many of the Buddhist stories. And if you remember Milarepa, who had all the demons filling his cave, and every time he gave them what they needed, they were released. And finally, the most powerful demon, it wasn't a thing. Milarepa had to just become fearless and put his head into the mouth of that demon. And then that demon became Saringma, his guardian protector for the rest of time. And Saringma is still a guardian protector of the Dharma. So here is the story repeating itself in this practice. So we change places, we become the demon, and really look at our still maybe a little fearful self, and say, I will help you by, I will protect you by, the pledge I make to you is this: you can gain access to me in this way. So every time we work with the thoughts that we carry, see their ephemeral quality, watch them dissolve. We're working in small, large small and large ways into freeing our minds into the great spaciousness, the great boundlessness, the great emptiness. So all of these mind trainings end in this way. We, the demon, and ourselves dissolve into emptiness. We can totally relax with our minds because there isn't a hidden fear anymore. There isn't a story, a trigger that's going to come up over and over and over again, always pushing us into reactivity. All those thoughts can just flow freely as our larger experience notices thoughts, but then focuses not on the thoughts, but the great spaciousness. And all of you know that it's not just once. This might be a special practice that you work with over and over and over again. And if you're very interested, you might look at Tsultrim Alione's book or her online trainings. But remember, it's a story and a mind training that repeats itself in many ways. We see the echo in Milarepa. It's just literally presented in this mind training. And it's carried over into the next of the mind trainings, which is now visualize all of your body becoming a torma, which is a cake. I like imagining Western birthday cakes instead of the traditional tormas, and offer it first to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and then all sentient beings. So having worked through our fears, then in the next mind training, we have more closely come to the capacity of Siddhartha's resting in bodhicitta and freely offering his body with a joyous fearlessness. So I think I mentioned today would be quite the wild training. So let's just sit for this a moment and think about the triggers that we might have, and really consider sitting in front of them and in any way that feels safe to you, thinking about, what do you have to teach me? So it can be an absolutely minor thing that's very safe, but you see there's a reaction over and over. What do you want from me? What do you need from me? What do you have to teach me? And the deeper meaning of need may take a long, long time to become clear. And that's perfectly okay. This is one method among many methods. But seeing your body then being offered as slabs of meat or dissolved into nectar, and really seeing that need being satisfied, and seeing that hungry ghost in that satisfaction, not holding any power. So your mind is released from struggle. You're not struggling with, you're offering and relaxing. Not thinking of that quote from the Buddha of why do we walk by the suffering of others, of the inability to help. In your imagination, working with a thought form that you carry, imagining feeding that thought form until it's relaxed and satisfied, no longer hurting. And again, with great care, knowing that PTSD is a very particularly difficult long-term thing to work with, not going into that area or that realm until it's absolutely safe for you to do that. But looking at just, as they were saying earlier in this particular mind training, shaving one sliver off one part of a fear that you carry, or one sliver off one trigger. I think I became aware of gender differences as a toddler. So, if I see sexism arising, I can be reactive. So I can sliver off one type of comment and look at that and release that. And I will do it over and over again till it's no longer a distraction that blocks my access to spacious meditation. Then letting this imaginary work dissolve, resting in any aspect that you've approached this morning, congratulating yourself for stepping over the line of fearfulness, even if it's just with your little finger, finding one little bit of fearlessness that sustains more work until you have complete freedom. So we'll just rest for a minute in that dissolution because we'll have a longer meditation at 11. So we'll do a short dedication now before discussion. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.